The GHOUL by Clark Ashton Smith, originally published 1934. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. During the reign of the Caliph Vatek, a young man of good repute and family named Nur ad-Din Hassan was haled before the Qadi Ahmed ben Bakr at Bussorah. Now, Nur ad-Din was a comely youth of open mind and gentle mien, and great was the astonishment of the Qadi and of all others present when they heard the charges that were preferred against him. He was accused of having slain 7 people, one by one, on 7 successive nights, and of having left the corpses in a cemetery near Bussorah, where they were found lying afterwards, with their bodies and members devoured in a fearsome manner, as if by jackals. Of the people he was said to have slain, 3 were women, 2 were traveling merchants, 1 was a mendicant, and 1 a gravedigger. Ahmed ben Bakr was filled with the learning and wisdom of honorable years, and withal was possessed of much perspicacity. But when he was deeply perplexed by the strangeness and atrocity of these crimes, and by the mild demeanor and well-bred aspect of Nur ad-Din Hassan, which he could in no wise reconcile with them, he heard in silence the testimony of witnesses who had seen Nur ad-Din bearing on his shoulders the body of a woman at yestereve in the cemetery, and others who on several occasions had observed him coming from the neighborhood at unseemly hours when only thieves and murderers would be abroad. Then, have considered all these, he questioned the youth closely. "Nur ad-Din Hassan," he said, "thou hast been charged with crimes of exceeding foulness which thy bearing and thy lineaments belie. Is there haply an explanation of these things by which thou canst wholly clear thyself, or in some measure mitigate the heinousness of thy deeds? If so it be that thou art guilty, I adjure thee to tell me the truth in this matter." Now Nur ad-Din Hassan arose before the Qadi, and the heaviness of extreme shame and sorrow was visible on his countenance. "Alas, O Qadi," he replied, "for the charges that have been brought against me are indeed true. It was I and none other who slew these people, nor can I offer you any extenuation of my act." The Qadi was sorely grieved and astonished when he heard this answer. "I must perforce believe thee," he said sternly, "but thou hast confessed a thing which will make thy name henceforward an abomination in the ears and mouths of men. I command thee to tell me why these crimes were committed, and what offense these persons had given thee, or what injury they had done thee, or if perchance thou slewest them for gain, like a common robber." "There was neither offense given nor injury wrought by any of them against me," replied Nur ad-Din, "and I did not kill them for their money or belongings or apparel, since I had no need of such things, and aside from that have always been an honest man." "Then," cried Ahmed ben Bakr, greatly puzzled, "what was thy reason if it was none of these?" Now the face of Nur ad-Din Hassan grew heavier still with sorrow, and he bowed his head in a shamefaced manner that bespoke the utterness of profound remorse. And standing thus before the Qadi, he told this story. "The reversals of fortune, O Qadi, are swift and grievous, and beyond the foreknowing or advertence of man. Alas, for less than a fortnight agone I was the happiest and most guiltless of mortals, with no thought of wrongdoing toward anyone. I was wedded to Amina, the daughter of the jewel merchant Abul Kogia, and I loved her deeply, and was much beloved by her in turn. And moreover, we were at this time anticipating the birth of our first child. I had inherited from my father a rich estate and many slaves. The cares of life were light upon my shoulders, and I had, it would seem, every reason to count myself among those whom Allah has blessed with an earthly foretaste of heaven. Judge, then, the excessive nature of my grief when Amina died in the same hour when she was to have been delivered. From that time, in the dire extremity of my lamentation, I was as one bereft of light and knowledge. I was deaf to all those who sought to condole with me, and blind to their friendly offices. After the burial of Amina, my sorrow became a veritable madness, and I wandered by night to her grave in the cemetery near Bussorah, and flung myself prostrate before the newly lettered tombstone on the earth that had been digged that very day. My senses deserted me, and I knew not how long I remained on the damp clay beneath the cypresses, while the horn of a decrescent moon arose in the heavens. Then, in my stupor of abandonment, I heard a terrible voice that bade me rise from the ground on which I was lying, and lifting my head a little, I saw a hideous demon of gigantic frame and stature, with eyes of scarlet fire beneath brows that were coarse as tangled rootlets, and fangs that overhung a cavernous mouth, and earth-black nails that were longer and sharper than those of the hyena. And the demon said to me, "I am a ghoul, and it is my office to devour the bodies of the dead. I have now come to claim the corpse that was interred today beneath the soil on which thou art lying in a fashion so unmannerly. Begone, for I have fasted since yesternight, and I am much an hungered." Now at the sight of this demon, and the sound of his dreadful voice, and the still more dreadful meaning of his words, I was like to have swooned with terror on the cold clay. But I recovered myself in a manner, and besought him, saying, "Spare this grave, I implore thee, for she who lies buried therein is dearer to me than any living mortal, and I would not that her fair body should be the provender of an unclean demon such as thou." At this the ghoul was angered, and I thought that he would have done me some bodily violence. But again I besought him, swearing by Allah and Muhammad with many solemn oaths that I would grant him anything procurable, and would do for him any favor that lay in the power of man, if he would leave undespoiled the new-made grave of Amina. And the ghoul was somewhat mollified, and he said, "If thou wilt indeed perform for me a certain service, I shall do as thou askest." And I replied, "There is no service whatsoever its nature that I will not do for thee in this connection, and I pray thee to name thy desire." Then the ghoul said, "It is this, that thou shalt bring me each night for 8 successive nights the body of one whom thou hast slain with thine own hand. Do this, and I shall neither devour nor dig the body that lies interred hereunder." Now was I seized by utter horror and despair, since I had bound myself in all honor to grant the ghoul his hideous requirement, and I begged him to change the terms of the stipulation, saying to him, "Is it needful to thee, O eater of corpses, that the bodies should be those of people whom I myself have slain?" And the ghoul said, "Yea, for all others would be the natural provender of myself or of my kin in any event. I adjure thee by the promise thou hast given to meet me here tomorrow night, when darkness has wholly fallen, or as soon as thereafter thou art able, bringing the first of the 8 bodies." So saying, he strode off among the cypresses, and began to dig in another newly made grave at a little distance from that of Amina. I left the graveyard in even direr anguish than when I had come, thinking of that which I must do in fulfillment of my sworn promise to preserve the body of Amina from the demon. I know not how I survived the ensuing day, torn as I was between sorrow for the dead and my horror of the coming night with its repugnant duty. When darkness had descended, I went forth by stealth to a lonely road near the cemetery, and waiting there amid the low-grown branches of the trees, I slew the first passer with a sword and carried his body to the spot appointed by the ghoul. And each night thereafter, for 6 more nights, I returned to the same vicinity and repeated this deed, slaying always the very first who came, whether man or woman, or merchant or beggar or gravedigger. And the ghoul awaited me on each occasion and would begin to devour his provender in my presence, with small thanks and scant ceremony. 7 persons did I slay in all, till only one was wanting to complete the agreed number. And the person I slew yesternight was a woman, even as the witnesses have testified. All this I did with utmost repugnance and regret, and sustained only by the remembrance of my plighted word, and the fate which would befall the corpse of Amina if I should break the bond. This, O Kadi, is all my story. Alas, if for these lamentable crimes have availed me not, and I have failed in wholly keeping my bargain with the demon, who will doubtless this very night consume the body of Amina in lieu of the one corpse that is still lacking. I resign myself to thy judgment, O Ahmed ben Bakar, and I beseech thee for no other mercy than that of death, wherewith to terminate my double grief and my twofold remorse. When Nur-ad-Din Hassan had ended his narrative, the amazement of all who had heard him was verily multiplied, since no man could remember hearing a stranger tale. And the Kadi pondered for a long time, and then gave judgment, saying, I must needs marvel at thy story, but the crimes thou hast committed are none the less heinous, and Iblis himself would stand aghast before them. However, some allowance must be made for the fact that thou hadst given thy word to the ghoul, and was bound, as it were, in honor to fulfill his demand, no matter how horrible its nature. An allowance must likewise be made for thy connubial grief and the piety which caused thee to forfend thy wife's body from the demon. Yet I cannot adjudge thee guiltless, though I know not the punishment which is merited in a case so utterly without example or parallel. Therefore I set thee free with this injunction, that thou shalt make atonement for thy crimes in the fashion that seemeth best to thee, and shalt render justice to thyself and to others in such degree as thou art able. I thank thee for this mercy, replied Nur-ad-Din Hassan, and he then withdrew from the court amid the wonderment of all who were present. There was much debate when he had gone, and many were prone to question the wisdom of the Kadi's decision. Some there were who maintained that Nur-ad-Din should have been sentenced to death without delay for his abominable actions, though others argued for the sanctity of his oath to the ghoul, and would have exculpated him altogether or in part. And tales were told and instances were cited regarding the habits of ghouls and the strange plight of men who had surprised such demons in their nocturnal delvings. And again the discussion returned to Nur-ad-Din, and the judgment of the Kadi was once more upheld or assailed with diverse arguments. But amid all this, Ahmed ben Bakar was silent, saying only, Wait, for this man will render justice to himself and to all others concerned as far as the rendering thereof is possible. So indeed it happened, for on the morning of the next day another body was found in the cemetery near Bussorah, lying half devoured on the grave of Nur-ad-Din Hassan's wife, Amina, and the body was that of Nur-ad-Din, self-slain, who in this manner had not only fulfilled the injunction of the Qadi, but had also kept his bargain with the GHOUL by providing him the required number of corpses. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.